Lyndsay had been born with bad tummy pains and bloating and crying day and night. We tried every formula in the book. Things would help a little bit, and then they wouldn't help at all. I believed God could do anything, but I couldn't understand why He wasn't healing my little girl. I said, I don't see your mercy. I don't see your compassion. I know you could heal this little girl, but I don't see that you even care.
What did you do next? Did you actually say, God, how do I feed her? How did you do that? What do you do when tragedy or trauma hits you? How do you handle it, and how do you move on? God often is asked the question, why did you allow this to happen? With me today is Cyndy McCollum, who lost her daughter Lyndsay, that passed away at the age of 7 years old. How was it handled? And how did she move on from that point? Cyndy, welcome.
Thank you.
So there was a point you were angry with God. Mm-hmm. Why was that?
Well, Lyndsay had been born with just this inability to really settle herself, or to drink, to nurse, or to drink from even a bottle very easily. And after about 2 years of this, especially when she started having some real bad tummy pains and bloating and crying day and night for 2 to 3 days, it wore on me. And I knew from as long as I can remember, I believed from the bottom of my heart that God could do anything, but I couldn't understand why He wasn't healing my little girl and giving her peace and answering our prayers.
Now, is there, what was the problem with Lyndsay?
Well, the doctors were still trying to figure it out. They were perplexed. We tried every formula in the book. We tried, medications, even strong medications like morphine, to try to help with her pain. And things would help a little bit, and then they wouldn't help at all.
I used to have a childcare, and kids cry.
Right.
And there's a point that you want to say, shut up. Let's be real. Doesn't mean there's not a real situation, there's not a real problem. But if you have that all the time as a mother, knowing your little one is in pain, mm-hmm. that must be wearing pretty thick.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember even, we'd have like maybe her birthday, her first year birthday, and she got a taste of the frosting and she just lit up like a light bulb. And she was, everyone was laughing because of her, just her joy. And I knew deep down in the pit of my stomach that we were going to go into one of these episodes after that. And it always made me a little nervous, so I couldn't really enjoy some of her happiness because I just knew there would be a downside to it when she got all excited and or tried a different food, a fun food, and it was not fun.
So you're dealing with this for year after year. Now, you weren't in America at that time, is that correct?
Yes.
You were a missionary?
Well, she was actually born in Honduras. She was born on time. My other two girls were born early. And she, everything seemed to be fine.
No problems, no nothing, everything done right by the book,
Right.
Everything in order, and this happens while you are a missionary, which must be really hard to serve probably when you're constantly dealing with Lyndsay that is that sick. Now the doctors, there was no answer, no nothing, feeding tubes. Was anything else that would help her that you could move on from there?
Yeah, they tried everything. Spinal taps. They did test after test, and they tried a feeding tube, which was put right in her stomach, and it only made the problem worse, which led to some of those day and night episodes, because we could essentially force feed her. Before it was at her own pace, and she felt something not comfortable in her tummy and she'd stop, and then she wouldn't get enough calories, and so we tried to fix it the medical way, and it just caused more problems.
Now, when there's a sick child in the family, or that has a diagnosis of sickness, and you see it in front of your eyes, it impacts everyone, the whole family. How is the rest of the family and her siblings handling this?
Well, I was just reminded of one instance where I was getting a bottle ready for her, and so I have 3 daughters, so Johanna's the oldest, and then Maria. And Maria was probably 3 at the time, and I saw her disappear into the room where Lyndsay was. She was laying on the floor on her blanket, and Lyndsay had been fussing, and then all of a sudden I realized it's all quiet in there. So I peeked in, and Maria was bending over her and just talking to her. And they had, each of the girls had a little bit of a relationship with her. But as time went on, and I was really trying to control and bring peace to our home, I ended up doing what I could to help her to be safe, and then closing the door on her crying, because I wanted to spend my focus on my other girls as well. I didn't want to be one of those moms that would do everything and spend all their time on the special needs kid and then neglect the rest of their children. And I was so adamant about that. I think I kind of went overboard a little bit, but yeah, they seem to have a good memory of growing up, even with Lyndsay in the background.
Even with the crying and all the sound and all that. Now, if I would have been you, which I am not, we're all our own individuals, I think the average person is probably bargaining with God, is screaming at God, is crying to God, and then blaming God. Was this you?
To a very large extent.
Tell me a little bit about that. What did that look like?
It was a process throughout her whole 7 years of life. We had people praying for her. We had people helping us with her. We had people praying. We knew that God was a God who answered prayers, and we prayed. But when she would go through those episodes and we couldn't find answers, and we couldn't find solutions, and we couldn't see her at peace and developing normally and all of this, I became more and more angry. Mm-hmm. And one day, when she was in the middle of one of those episodes, I think I must have been alone, because I went into my bedroom and just threw myself on the floor by the bed and just had it out with the Lord. And I was so angry, and I said, I don't see your mercy. I don't see your compassion. I don't see your love. I know you could heal this little girl, but I don't see that you even care. And I was so angry, and I actually said it out loud, which was not my MO. And I got it out.
Actually, it's important to get that out, because
yes,
the Lord can handle it.
Yeah.
The Lord can handle it. Did you hear a response about that? How did that?
It was fairly immediate. I had this picture just flash in front of me of the cross.
Just the cross.
And, as a believer in Jesus and having accepted him when I was 5 years old, I knew exactly that was a picture of his mercy. And I said, okay, I'll give you that much. I'll give you this much.
I want to hear more about that. How do you handle a situation that seems absolutely impossible? Stay tuned. You don't want to miss it.
Are you ready to inspire and change lives? You can make a difference for a better tomorrow. God created you for more. You matter. There is an unprecedented pandemic of forgotten hearts. You can bring hope and answers. Inmates feel alone, afraid, and abandoned. Now is the time to find, to stand, to change, and transform lives. God loves them unconditionally. Adopt a Champion empowers inmates to be a champion within themselves, within their family, and in the world. There are 3 ways you can help. Become part of our team, pray, and donate. Together, we can make a difference. You can start today. Go to adoptachampion.org.
Cyndy McCollum screamed at God, saying, "Where are you? Where is your mercy? Where is your grace?" when her little girl was so sick. How would you have handled that? And what is really the answer? She said something about a cross, but let's get back to that. So you're talking the cross is the answer. And you know, I like what you're saying, but that is so cliche. They
Right.
always say that. So how do you experience that? Maybe when God says it is different, but the pain in front of you is still there, you know? So how do you handle that cliche answer of the Lord?
Right? You know, I didn't hear it that way, although I had grown up as a young adult, as in the church period as a child, but as a young adult, I couldn't believe that the cross was the only measure of God's love. And that's kind of, it kind of tripped me up, even though I knew that it was the beginning of my relationship with him. You know, my salvation was from the cross. So when he flashed that at me, it's funny, but I didn't take it the way that I'd kind of thought of it. All I knew was that I needed his mercy, and he gave it to me at the cross. And so all I could say is, out of all the things I said, I'm not seeing his compassion, his love, his goodness, his mercy. I could say, okay, I'll give you that because that is where you showed mercy. And I'll give you that much trust because what you just showed me and reminded me is true.
And that helped you be at peace, but Lyndsay was still sick.
Yeah.
It had not changed. Now, you're in Honduras. Is there a time that you say, I need to go home? Is the healthcare in America better or not?
Well, at that time, we had already come back to the States because we couldn't get the health care that we needed to determine what was going on.
Now, was there ever a point that a doctor actually was able to help you with Lyndsay? What the problem was? There should be some kind of an answer. You know, we're all about medical field, help of the doctors, and they're supposed to fix it, right? So even if that's not, it's often that God can use that, but not necessarily.
The doctors actually couldn't help. The top Mayo Clinic pediatric neurologist and the top Mayo Clinic pediatric gastroenterologist had no answers. And our very reputable pediatrician came to the end of his rope and said, I don't know what else to do, Cyndy. I've done everything I know and tried things that he didn't even know or didn't necessarily maybe believe in, but he was trying everything he could think of. And they came to the end of everything they knew and had in their toolboxes.
And so now it's you and God again. Mm-hmm. That's all there is. Yeah. How did you move forward from that point? I see a little girl super skinny, not getting the nutrition she needs, it being a struggle. Yeah. What did you do next? Did you actually say, God, how do I feed her? How did you do that?
Well, going back to that first picture of the cross that he showed me, that was actually just the beginning of building, of him. And I look back now, I can say he actually made the effort to earn my trust. And so what happened was that was just a little tiny drop in the bucket that I was able to give him. And then the next time that she went through one of those episodes, I just, again, another small act of trust. I just laid on the carpet in front of her crib and hands up, face down, and just said, okay, here, this is all I've got.
That's huge.
And while I did that, my whole body was just, my blood pressure must have been high, but my whole body was just coursing with this awful sense of helplessness. But it's what I had. And so every time I was just giving him just a little bit more and a little bit more. And after, I don't know, it was probably within that next year that I started to actually see him show up. And I started to actually believe that something good would come out of a crisis. And we had plenty of those. And I started actually seeing him answering prayer. But it was like the Lord said, I don't want to do this without you. You know, we're going to do this together.
I'm just listening, taking it in. And I'm actually, I know I was silent for a moment there, but I was envisioning that is huge, that you're able to trust the Lord when you want him just to fix at that moment, and most likely he does too. Of course he does.
Well, and let me just clarify.
Yeah.
I only gave him what little tiny bit I had. So that was when she was about 2.5 years old. And by the time she passed away when she was 7, that trust had grown. But it was such a long process, and it happened every time that we had this crisis, and I didn't know what to do. And I felt helpless as a mom. But it was just little snippets, whatever I had that I could give.
Did you ever ask the Lord, well, so what is the problem here? What is the health issue? What is the situation? Is it an allergic reaction? Or what is going on? Or asking for a formula how to fix it?
Yeah, all the time. One of the times that I remember the most is we had returned to Honduras, and this was just before 9/11.
Why? Why
Because
go
she was,
back?
Because she was doing so well.
How come she was
turned the
doing
corner.
good?
We couldn't explain it. But she started tolerating.
Same food, same everything?
Yep. Something happened. We have pictures of her, and we were just so excited to see her, gaining weight and just seemed to be doing really well. We couldn't explain it, but whatever we had going, we thought was working. So we felt like we got the okay to go back to Honduras.
Wouldn't you want to stay put that moment? Because things are right, and you almost don't want to touch it,
Yeah.
By chance.
I think we just knew that we had what we needed to be able to care for her, and that's where our hearts were.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you're back in Honduras, and it starts all over again.
Yeah. What happened was even before all of the episodes, we had a situation where she had this G tube in her tummy for feeding, and it had a little balloon in her stomach, and the little balloon that held it in kept just deflating, and we couldn't figure out why. But when it did that, we had to replace it with a new one. So we came back with what we thought was going to be a supply for a long time of 6 of those, and we went through almost all 6 in the first, few weeks. And then when we were on the very last one, I called back to the States and I said, hey, we need you to send us some more because we're on the last one. And the nurse on the other end said, Cyndy, I can't. All the airports are closed because of 9/11.
Wow.
I don't have any way to ship anything.
I'll hold you right there. You need something. Everything has been really tough from the get-go with Lyndsay. Things are happening, but it's a struggle. And yet, when you need it the most, when you need God to show up, the airports are closed. Stay tuned. People tell me, Barb, I can't hear the voice of God. How can I hear His voice? I used to have a hard time with this too. I spent years learning the difference between my own head and God's voice. When I learned how, my life changed. Transformations that used to take me weeks now only take me seconds. I want to share with you everything I learned in those few years in only 3 hours at no charge. Go to our website, barbtv.org, and sign up for our free course titled Empower a Champion, Hearing the Voice of God. Many of you are struggling in life. There is hope. Our passion is for you to have breakthrough by clearly hearing the voice of God. Go to barbtv.org under the tab Empower a Champion and sign up today. So Cyndy, working all these years with the Lord for Lyndsay, fighting for her, you're a nurse.
Yeah.
So you probably saw a lot more things than any other of us would actually have realized. What was that like?
Well, being her mom, yeah, I saw a lot. I saw the ups and downs. I saw the really good moments that she had that I cherished. And this one time in particular where we seemed to be in a crisis moment always resonates in my heart, because at that moment I recognized that I actually had belief in my heart that God was going to show up somehow. And He did. It was absolutely amazing because He gave us a solution that showed us actually what the problem was. She had too much acid in her tummy.
That's what I was wondering.
The burns. Yeah.
The acid.
And it wasn't like we found a permanent solution because the antacids didn't always work. But when we started giving her just a little bit of Tums, it's like the problem went away. And that last G-tube lasted for, I don't know, months to a year. It was amazing. But it was just one of those highlights where we saw God actually come into the picture and turn things around.
So were you able to feed her?
Eventually, yeah. We were still experimenting, but finally, about 6 months before she passed away, I felt like the Lord gave me the idea to try her on raw goat's milk and veggie juice.
Which sounds absolutely ridiculous. Did it work?
Yeah. Her little tummy, which was often like a little cantaloupe and just really distended and bloated, it went down to concave, which I knew it really was. And she went down, she never had one of those crying night and day episodes again.
Tums and veggie goat milk. And it fixed it. But you just said she actually passed away 6 months later.
Yeah.
And the way I would, as a human, respond to that is like, what went wrong? But that's the human way we talk about that.
Right. And I had questions for God, and I asked him some questions. One of the questions I asked him was, why? Did I do something wrong? And he said, no, you were doing everything right. And he also showed me very clearly, which I didn't see at the time, that when he gave me the solution of the raw goat's milk and veggie juice, after we tried formula after formula after formula, specialty formulas, and nothing worked, that he showed me that that had been his healing answer to her issues, because they went away.
So the problem stops. Mm-hmm. And then there is that moment that it's it, which is hard to talk about anyway. It would be painful.
Yeah.
How did you respond at that moment? And why? And why is probably the wrong question anyways.
Well, the how part is, I was taking care of her like I always did. And one time I was caring for her and she started choking and spitting up some stuff. And I called my husband. He happened to be at home at the time. And I called him in there and he looked at me and, okay, so I'm a nurse and a mom. I always say that's a lethal combination. But he said, stop being a nurse, be a mom. And I knew what that meant. So I swooped her up in my arms, and for the last few seconds of her life, I just held her. And I was so thankful that he had been there and said that.
That's amazing. That's amazing that you were there at the end, and then yet you took care of her, and the why questions are always there. But mm-hmm. yet, as I've talked to you before, you said God was there. Mm-hmm. So how did God respond to you? You said, hey, God, what happened here? What happened?
He gave me some really practical answers. But the thing that marked me the most was that during those last, from when she was 2.5 years to when she passed away, she had just had her 7th birthday, that trust with him and that bedrock belief that he really was good and that he really did show up for me when I needed him and when my little girl needed him, that had grown to a place where when she passed away, I was really sad. I missed what I missed the most. I didn't miss the crying. It was actually partly a relief. But what I missed was seeing her whole and well. But what I didn't have was bitterness. All of those things that you go through when you're grieving, I'd already gone through all of that. The bargaining, the denial, the anger. All of that I'd already gone through. And my relationship with the Lord had become so much more full of trust that I was able to ask him questions and he was able to answer and soothe my heart, even though this wasn't the way I wanted it to happen.
No, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Now, what you often see, and the Lord did give you the formula, mm-hmm. Did you ever get to the point that you think you were not giving her enough out of fear it would go wrong again?
Yeah. I'm looking back, I'm absolutely sure that's exactly what happened, because I didn't understand that she'd been healed. I was still looking for answers, and I was still expecting the worst. It wasn't until after she passed away that the Lord pointed back to that 6 months prior, and he said, I healed her right there. And I think, I didn't see it. Is that a bad thing on me? Is it all on me?
I think it's human.
I think it's completely human. I have someone in my life who says, "There you go, being human again," and I just
that's an insult. I would not go that way. Now, afterwards, when you have cared for a child with special needs is probably the wrong word, but that needs full attention, feeding, all that. I've heard of people falling in this hole. Did you do that?
You mean after she passed away?
Yes.
No. I was sad. I missed her, but I actually felt like it was time to move on.
I was ready to move on.
Yeah.
So if you could think right now of people that are dealing with situations like you dealt with for those 7 years, what would your advice be to the viewer?
I would say, don't be afraid to ask honest questions of God, even if you're feeling angry, even if you're feeling bitter, even if you don't know what to do. He is so present and he's so good. He is the Father that you may have never had, but he won't deny his children that he loves so much.
Wow, that is from someone that has experienced it all. Cyndy has understood that, and this show will be dedicated to Lyndsay as a great memory to her. And I just wanted to let you know, if you would like prayer, 855-515-5550, or go to barbtv.org. And Cyndy, for you to bring a show when it's not the answer we want, when it's not always the way we want it to end the way it ended, but yet, wasn't there something that a family member saw Lyndsay in heaven?
Yes, I love this story because it just shows how God shows up. When we had her memorial service, one of our friends actually got up and shared a vision that she'd had of Lyndsay just playing and dancing in this field, and she couldn't see exactly who it was at first, and then she saw she was dancing with Jesus. And years later, before she passed away, my husband's grandmother told me that the night before the memorial service, she'd had a dream just like that. And she brushed it off as just her heart just missing Lyndsay. But when this woman, who she did not know, shared that at the memorial service, she was like, oh my goodness, that was God.
Thank you so much for being on the show. God is real. God loves you. And so do I.